Hello and welcome to Life Challenges, better known as a conversation with Dr. David Clayman. Last time we were together, we were going into mental illness. We were talking about mental illness in West Virginia, and as we closed out, we were talking about the fact that Dr. Clayman was going to be attending a meeting and that there was a coalition forming to look at what could we do as a state to better assist people through some type of any kind of help where mental illness was concerned. And so the question is, did you have your meeting? And
Well, we actually had 27 meetings.
well, not since you were here last.
Well, but the last meeting was just the clearings of our report. Last year in the legislative session, we had Senate Bill 232 that was sponsored by Senator Trump and Senator Rucker, and then moved over for approval in the House under the guidance of Delegate Capito, who's the chair of the House Judiciary. I get my committee is correct. So we were. Let me step back. I have been serving in a capacity as the chair. Get ready.
Right.
Of the Dangerous Assessment Advisory Board.
Dangerous assessment.
Or dangerousness, but it's a dangerousness
Assessing
assessment.
how dangerous someone is?
Yeah, and what this was with all of the things that are going on, and this will make sense in a minute. We have two state hospitals,
Right.
one of which is mostly forensics, and the other one is a mixture. And then we have some supportive hospitals around
About mostly forensics, meaning?
legally based issues.
Okay.
Competency and trial being a major one. So we were created to assist the judiciary and now expanded to other parts of the legal system. That if there's a question on risk, is it safe to the individual, to the public? What can we do for this person? So when the judges get somebody who's released from the hospital, let's say they time out on the amount of time they're allowed to stay in the hospital to be restored to competency, which is a legal issue, that they can stand trial. Sometimes we have to put them in the hospital to bring them back to competency or bring them to competency. If they don't get better, which we call not competence and non-restorable, not competent, non-restorable, they can be released. And then the judges go, well, what can we do? Well, they can refer to the committee now, and we have 9 members of the committee, and we are advisory. It's very complicated. No authority, advisory. But we do a good job when we get the referrals.
You assess it.
We assess it and then make a recommendation to the court. What can it be? Step down, discharge, less supervision, blah, 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 blah. So we have a system, and this is purely from forensics. This all arose from forensics. So I want to, and I'm going to talk about the lessons we learned. So we have people in the hospital. We have people that need to be in the community that can't live on their own, which may, and this is the part that is interesting, they may not have been adjudicated yet. They may not have run into the legal system yet, but we still got to find something to do with them and help them out and take care of them in some form. So the legislature, in its wisdom, hopefully, commissioned us to do this study. And it was 18 identified agencies or stakeholders. We brought in a few more. We had 27 meetings, formal meetings over 8 months. We had 2 unbelievable people helping us, Jenny Lancaster and Martha Minter, who were the outside people that put the report together, that recorded. They were absolutely amazing. And then the statewide forensic clinical director, Colleen Lillard, and the statewide forensic coordinator, John Snyder, who are both housed at Sharp but are separate from Sharp technically. So we began collecting data, and we thought we knew a whole bunch of stuff. There were 4 identified populations, which leads into the concerns you have. We have, and this is an important one because you just mentioned them, we have the IDD, intellectually and developmentally disabled,
Okay.
autism, other kinds of things, cognitively impaired for whatever reason it may be, acquired or otherwise, and then traumatic brain injury are the first group. And we met with people that had a very significant interest in that group, serious mental illness, SUD, substance abuse, in kids. with all the stuff that's happening with the children in the state. There's lots of laws that have changed that anybody under 14 has to be assessed for competency, which I'm not going to go into. It's very complicated. Actually, more complicated than I thought it was. Your point, I'll start there and I'll move backwards, is that people who have a range of disabilities or other kinds of issues with their behavior or the way in which they deal with the world sometimes encounter problems that necessitate initially short-term placement. I don't like the word hospitalization because some of these people are not mentally ill. And some of these people do not mean to be in a psych ward
Right.
or psych hospital, technically, unless we have a developmental disabilities unit, which is good if we would have them. I think we have one. So what happens is that the question that we came up with is, what do we do? We also work with corrections, by the way, and transitioning people out of corrections who have behavioral difficulties. And what the dickens do we do with them?
Because last show you were talking about the fact that we would take people off the street not knowing what to do with them and put them in corrections, put them into
Well, what
jails.
happens is and I just spent a whole bunch of time with the prosecutors last week. I spent time with the state police, with the chiefs I've been meeting with a whole bunch of people. And I don't want that to sound important, but just doing stuff with them.
You're doing your homework.
Kind of, and then I have other responsibilities with the police and law enforcement and first responders. I do a lot of their pre-hire testing, and I do a lot of their critical incident work where they run into problems. And several of these either have to do with their mental health, first responders and the cops, or the mental health of the patients they pick up.
Wow.
So there is, and even though we were meeting, there were lots of other meetings as DHHR goes through its evolution about what to do. And the first thing we learned was there's a lot of redundancy and not a lot of, and I don't want to say cooperative effort, but shared effort in taking care of these problems. Some of them are housed in a division. Some of them are housed in an agency. Some of them are housed for dealing with all these things, and they don't talk.
Oh.
And it's not anything evil. It's just the way things have evolved. DHHR has a certain role, the advocacy groups have a certain role, the treater groups have a certain role, and believe it or not, this is really amazing. We don't see things eye to eye in each of those groups.
Surprise.
And it's not that it's malicious, it's what the purpose of the agency is, or the group is. One may be advocacy, one may be getting people back on the street, or rehabilitating, or and we got a lot of input. And then all of a sudden we got amazed that about 6 months ago, maybe less, even after this bill started, probably about 6, we had a group of us that ran into a couple of problems of discharging somebody from the hospital. 3 cases. I can't go into them because people might identify, but they were really complex. One Saturday morning, I got a call at 8:30 from somebody saying, "Hey, Doc, we got a problem." But because I'm on the advisory board, they brought me in. We spent the whole day getting the person evaluated, holding them until they could get to see a mental hygiene commissioner. After the mental hygiene commissioner, making sure we had transport down to Bateman, getting them at Bateman, and then figuring out what to do with them. And there's no place to put them after you stabilize them at Bateman. And we have nothing right now in the communities we live in. So the first thing was there's not a lot of interagency sharing. And there's some protectivism that goes on. Some people just kind of silo themselves in.
This is my area, and you're not.
And there's not a lot of sharing. And I don't want to say distrust. We thought it was distrust, and it was just no vehicle and no way to feel like everybody was going to be working together for the same purpose. Even though we've been working at this. I mean, poor DHHR's got all of its responsibilities with abused and neglected kids, and we go on. And now we have this competency thing. And that has to, now, why that's important is because the competency thing falls into the forensic realm, not just the clinical realm. That means that when these kids get in trouble, when they're having problems, they're supposed to determine how competent they are to proceed with whatever process we have to put them in, outplacement, juvenile detention, and what do we do with them? Until the DAB, the Data Assessment Board, we really didn't have any place to talk about it or give advice. Now at least we do. So we had the transparency, and we had the sharing. Then we had transparency about people being able to talk about what they're doing and not being afraid that people are going to steal it. So across all the 4 groups, we came up with these 4 or 5 things that always were the problem. And it's not surprising, and it's very frustrating for the governor and for the legislature. It's going to take money.
It always boils down to.
Well, but if you look at the issue and we automatically assume aberrant behavior is mental health oriented, rather than social oriented or community support oriented, then everybody gets dumped in the hospital. And a lot of the people, and we can use the developmentally disabled, the IDD, because there's been a lot of noise about dumping them in the hospital. And I'm going to only use one piece of that, and I'll use two examples under that category. One is the spectrum disorders, autism spectrum. And I'm making this one up. Let's say you have a 26-year-old autistic man who's grown up with his family, whose parents are now in their 60s or so. The person still has some of the neurosensitivity to sights and sounds and flashing lights. And one day something happens and the individual starts to get agitated. And part of what happens when they get agitated, they flail and they resist people coming to them. They get angry. Well, let's just say, making this up, this 20-something man, big, smacks his mom in the face when she comes at him, bloodies her nose, and starts screaming, which has happened. And we try to do the de-escalation because it's community services that we can try to do that, but nothing works. And then he gets even angrier. This did happen. And he starts going around the house breaking things. Then they call the cops. The cops show up at the house. He's really agitated. He sees the cops, and he gets even more agitated, and he starts beating on the cops and resisting arrest. Assault, destruction of property, resisting arrest. Those are all criminal offenses. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, but I can see where you're going because he's mentally ill. I mean,
he's developmentally disabled.
Oh, excuse me.
But that's the important part. If he were mentally ill, per se, then we put them through the process. We arrest them. They're held in jail. They're go before the court. We do the evaluation for mental illness. We decide whether they're going to go to trial. We plead them and all that kind of stuff. But what we've mixed up is these kind of problems that may result in criminally oriented behavior, criminally defined behavior,
right,
that has no basis in criminal intent.
So what happens? He gets arrested.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, his mother is not going to bring charges against him.
Sometimes they do.
Oh, okay, all right.
Sometimes they don't have a choice if the guy beats on a cop. But the question would be is if he wasn't arrested and he was agitated like that, where does he go? Or she, or they. We have places. We have community placements. We have step-down units. We have transitional living facilities, all of which would be wonderful if we had more. I'm just going to say that we had more alternatives. I kind of look at it as a canal lock, that if you leave the hospital, if we put you in a crisis unit, which we don't have any crisis units, we have very few crisis units right now. We need to bring them back, but bring them back in a different way.
Did we ever have a crisis unit?
Yeah, we used to have a crisis unit here that people would come. It was mostly alcohol, but I think it was in St. Albans, or Dunbar. It was down that end of the valley. We drop them. Yeah, South Charleston.
Wasn't that CARES?
Yeah, well, CARES was one of them. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so we put them in CARES. Let's just use that as an example. Sober them up overnight. Now we can give them some meds, maybe, and they could go home the next day, and they weren't adjudicated. Or we would staff them, and we'd decide whether they needed something else. Get them an appointment at the behavioral health centers. That's another piece of the puzzle.
I was going to say, we've only had a few of those, don't we?
Oh, no, we have 11, 12 comprehensives. But they are so burdened. There are so many people going to this place, and then all of a sudden we add on for us, a legally based thing of how do we, our committee's mandate was to assist the legislature in understanding the problems with these 4 groups and what we might to divert them from going into the adjudicatory system.
So will this be discussed at this coming session, which
Lord
starts
only
next
knows.
month?
Well, we've submitted our report, and to the blessings of the people I mentioned, Martha, Jenny, John, we had 2 Jennys, and all the people that participated. Cindy Largent Hill, who's the child person for the Supreme Court. I mean, I could go on. I don't want to do the thank you to the thing, but people really gave us a lot of information. The deputy sheriff's associations, and I went out and talked to people just off the record, and not off the record because I didn't want them on the record, but I didn't bring my recorder. Everybody wants something to happen, and if we had this system, that would be one thing, that we could go from secure system to less secure, and we have pieces of that, but not enough and not coordinated. We have a state we used a model called the strategic intercept model. I can't remember what was developed. And it has 5 phases, but it really has 6. 0 is people that have not yet come in contact with the court system or the adjudicatory system, haven't been arrested, haven't that. And then we have 5 levels, and each level has certain kinds of issues involved, which gave us a framework to say, okay, what do we have? Great news, we have a lot of good things going on around the state. Technical side news, the strategic intercept model has never been used for a full state that we know of, to try to do this for a full state. It's usually county or more locale, but we're trying to fit it. We've got some ideas. So the first phase is we had like 9 or 10 mandates, like do this, come up with best practices, how do we implement it? We only got to what was going on. And I don't think I've been as proud of participating in anything like this directly for a long, long time in my career. This was just a real act of work.
Well, what you do fit in, as we know, as an audience, citizens, that the DHHR is going to split. It's going to split into 3 different.
It's already split.
It's already split.
It's splitting.
But it started that process. Will that ease what you're proposing, what you're wanting?
We don't know yet. We have just submitted the thing last week. They're going to go into interims this week. I have been in contact with a couple of people that are involved in the legislative process. They're interested. We've had wonderful support from a lot of people in the legislature. We just met with 2 legislators at the prosecuting attorneys meeting and asked them if we could talk to them and get some ideas. And we're hoping, this is the part that our bill will be rolled again this year. I might be going off script now. Oh, this will be another week before we get on.
So you're proposing a bill. I mean,
Well, we're going to continuation of our bill so we can continue with our mission. And now that we've started to fill in these blanks in the strategic intercept model that kind of lets us know where we go. But we've also found places that there are things going on in Wheeling or in Bluefield or in Charleston or in Morgantown that is only going on there. CIT training, critical incident training, crisis incident training, however the CIT stands for a couple of things. We're talking to each other. We're gonna try to. One of my goals for next year, and I don't like saying me, but
right, your committee,
the committee I work with, we'd like to have a 3-day face-to-face meeting somewhere where we really work, and we design this so that people in each of the areas knows what's really going on in the area. When you get to know people, things go better. There's 2 committees out there. There's one that's out of the Center for Excellence in Morgantown dealing with IDD. It's ECHO. We're getting ready to do some programming on what are our problems? What do we have to do? How do we separate out what's mental illness, because it's listed in a book that it says it's, spectrum disorders are in the book. But the issue is behavioral control, but not mental illness in the way we know it. Even with some of the mentally ill, we could do other things rather than keeping people in the hospital forever. One of the big points we know, so we got the cooperation, we should have transparency among everybody, the way we cooperate, and not have turf battles. I got caught in a turf battle 2 years ago. It was not very pleasant. We have to have data sharing, real data sharing that will allow us to know where people are. Like, we bring it up every day, and we're getting there. It's not like it's not there.
It would take a major system, would it not, for everyone to
money.
share?
Yeah, take some time. This is not a 5-week cure. We have to better identify who's there and what their problems are. We have to have clinicians that are not right out of high school or right out of college, where they haven't had a lot of internship, and even when they're new, that they don't understand. For instance, IDD, everybody thinks it's just autism. But then we have people who have had cognitive disorders, whether it's speech and language, whether it's motor, we have that. We have the TBI group that has had traumatic brain injury, whether from an accident like a car wreck, or even sometimes we have toxic things that ruin brain cells, and they're out in the community, and this part of the brain is really important, and it's the frontal lobes, and they don't have the ability to control impulse. They say and do things that look criminal. They may be inappropriate to someone. They may say something that's bad. Is it their mental illness? And is psychiatric care in a hospital where they're restrained the right thing? Probably not. In crisis? Probably yes. So how do we now have a fluid system where we have people passing in and out and they're coordinated? So then it gets to that, and it goes on. We have 5 or 6 areas that we'd like to study further to figure out.
As you talk about it, I can envision the fact, like, for example, the police officer is the first person on the scene. So he's going to have a lot of training, a lot of knowledge as to how to handle a situation, mental illness versus a criminal versus a shoplifter. In other words, you're going to have to start at ground zero, are you not, in order to...
Well, happily, Sharon, there are places that they're already working with. There are several communities that have CIT programs.
So that's what the CIT
That's
program does.
That's one of them is. It's to try to divert and help people not become victims if they don't have to be. Training the police how to de-escalate and not overreact, but sometimes that's not so easy.
I was going to say, that's got to be the hardest thing in the world.
But picture a deputy sheriff in a rural county that's called to a house where there's a lot of chaos going on. No one knows in the house that they have someone with an intellectual disability that can't understand and gets really upset, and the cop comes in and the guy's got a knife.
Yeah.
Equal or excessive force. You've got to meet the threat and take care of yourself as a cop, but also take care of the people around. So it's so complicated. So
yeah.
But we have community outreach programs. Charleston has a group that's out there dealing with the homeless, dealing with people that may or may not be mentally ill, but certainly have social problems and can't get along. Getting people who are already like the homeless and some others to be willing to accept help. Finding humane places that are not just cinder blocks to put people while they're being transitioned, to have the staff that compassionately deals with them. We have residential facilities. There's 2 big companies in the state, and they try. I worked on a case with a guy on the spectrum who got really, when he went off, and he's a big kid and hard to...
Someday, we got to talk about autism and spectrums, because I always think of brilliant people who...
Asperger's end.
Oh, yeah. In other words, I've always, when somebody says spectrum to me, I think of someone who's brilliant and can do math in their heads and all of that type of thing. But then when you're using spectrum, you're using sensitivity and lighting and reaction.
And there's the point.
So obviously, this poor illness just spans...
But take away from me, this condition that we've now labeled autism spectrum means that we've got a whole bunch of people that don't look like each other. Schizophrenia, people don't look like each other all the time.
That's mental illness. That's not autism, is it?
No, that's mental. That's okay. SMI.
Okay.
But when we say the words, everybody identifies this, and they really don't know. So our job, if we're reconstituted for the next session, will be to work with the, let's use the autism spectrum group, IDD, the group out at Morgantown with EGO. I think it's EGO. We'll work with them. How do we go out and do community programming? What kind of input do we do? What's our first step? And set up a sequential step. So that's the first. We also belong now to this grassroots transition team out of the correction system. We have now met. We have no official designation, but we meet because we saw it was better for us to, this is just this last year. We have about, I can't remember, 10 to 16 people that meet. Corrections, me, courts. We all sit down and we try to do things. We've got these grassroots things, and this is what I meant by we don't really know what's going on. You're 100% right. But the poor police have enough problems at this point.
Right.
We can't get enough of them, and we don't. So what we're going to try to do is take a look. That was our mandate. And everybody, if you hear DHHR talking, if you hear about other people talking, everybody's talking just about the same things. But nobody's been kind of saying, okay, so now we have this. And numbers-wise, compared to New York or California or wherever, we don't have that many problems. But percentage-wise, we have problems, and they're costly. They're
Yes.
costly in terms of human concern. You know, what do you do with someone who's innocent because they can't control their behavior, or the ABA work, the applied behavior analysis work, hasn't worked? So now our goal is to say we've identified 4 or 5 areas that are across that. What we need. We know we have to have transparency between all the agencies, including DHHR. We have I want to look quickly. We have an arrangement now between corrections and forensics that they have a signed working arrangement that when we have somebody at the hospital that we've brought back to competency, so they've been treated, they can now go back to the regional jail and wait to go to trial. What often has happened in the past, they leave sharp, they come to the regional jail, and the provider at the regional jail changes the medicines, even though we've got them behaving okay.
It changes the medicines?
Yeah, they just, because that's what they do sometimes. It's not a bad thing. But we now have an agreement that when we release someone, we have a discharge planner in the corrections system, the forensic system, who calls those of us that are working in the jail system and say, Sharon King is coming out, and we've got her on pink pills. Leave her on the pink pills. And we work together. So if he comes back to the pink pill, on the pink pills and starts acting out or refuses meds, we talk to people in the forensic system who deal with being in the jails. We talk to people in the forensic system that are being in the hospitals, and we're starting to talk to each other. Now, problem is the drugs that they often give in the state hospital are more expensive than the formularies that we get. So I want you to hear that when we started this thing out, it's, oh yeah, this is going to be easy. IDD waiver. IDD, from what we used to call Asperger's, was kind of the really bright people that were a little bit odd, to people who have neuromuscular, neuromotor, neurocognitive diseases. SMI, depression,
We've got to come back to it. We've got to come back to it.
You don't think I'm excited about this, do you?
It's interesting, it's different, it's an education within itself. On behalf of Dr. Kleeman, I'm Sharon King, thanking you for watching the Library Television Network. Till next time, bye-bye. Oh.